for my midterm, I decided to do empanadas. It's something that in my house that I constantly make. Um, I'm a step ahead, so the first step into making empanadas is to browning the meat. And to browning the meat, you're just basically draining the fat. So to drain the fat, we season it with a little bit of organic seasoning, just so the fat drains from the meat and the meat just becomes a little bit darkened, so that we can um, take out the accessing oils, because we don't want that in the meat. So what we're gonna do first, after we at least brown the meat, is by draining the meat. So what we're gonna do is just pour it in the sink with the lid on top of the pot, and you want to make sure that all the oil and none of the meat comes out, just the oil. So what we're gonna do is, after the oil is taken out of the meat, put it back in the pot, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna add some peas and some carrots. Not a full bag, but at least half a bag, just to give it a little bit of other, just besides meat in the empanadas. So what we're gonna do is we want to pour it into the meat. Pour it into the meat, and then after we have the vegetables in the meat, we want to season it. So by seasoning it, we're putting it to. I put granulated garlic and sea salt. And for a little bit of color for the meat, I put a little bit of paprika. So this is there's no real measurements in this. You put as much as you want, just for taste. So what I don't put too much. So I just a generous dab of garlic, of salt. But paprika, it's only very little, so you want to do just a dab of it. And once you incorporate all the seasonings, then you turn the meat back on, and you want to put the heat on medium to medium high. You don't want to put it low, because the meat's already cooked. You're just darkening it more, and you don't want to put it too high, because you don't want to burn the meat. So what you ended up doing is make sure that everything is incorporated into the meat. So you mix it a little bit, make sure you let it cook, let it simmer, let the meat get darker a little bit. You can leave the lid on, or just so that way that it cooks better, it cooks faster, the steam incorporates to the meat. Or you could just have the lid off, as how I have it. And you want to, maybe every minute or two, you want to keep stirring it, just so that the meat doesn't stick, and why the meat doesn't burn. And like I said, all we want to do is just get the meat fully cooked. So we just want to darken it more before we start incorporating it into the discs, and before it goes into the oven to bake. So as you can see, the meat's getting a little darker on the sides here. There's no oil in the meat, there's no liquid in it. So we want to give it another maybe 2 or 3 minutes, so that the meat is more dark color than light color. And usually I like to prepare this around family gatherings. This is more of like an appetizer, but this is more of what we do. I make this only for gatherings. So you get the meat turned around. Make sure that the vegetables are. Now you could take vegetables from a pack, or you can cut up your own vegetables. I decided to do the frozen pack. It's all the same, and like I said, you can use depending on what you want. Everything is for taste. What I usually do, like I said, is I put salt and garlic, um, and the meat is already almost done. What I do is just keep turning it so that the meat doesn't stick. Now you also don't want to make sure that there's no big chunks. So if you see any big chunks before incorporating into the disc, you want to break the meat up. Because when you put them in the disc, you want to make sure that there's a generous amount of meat. You want to make sure that so that you're not putting too much meat in one and then another empanada doesn't have has less. You want to just start pick up the meat. Maybe give it one more turn. So I'm gonna do that. Break that up a little more. And then, at least for right now, you want to let it just simmer, get a little bit more dark here. And after a while the meat is cooked, you want to let the meat finish cooking here and get the oven ready. So that way you're not, the oven is preheating. That way by the time you can get the discs ready, you can already slice them in the oven. Now, the temperature you want to have empanadas on, you can bake them or you can fry them. I usually fry them, but for today at least, I'm gonna bake them. So you don't want to have the oven too high. So what you want to do is you want to get it. You want to get it not 350. You want to get it at least below, maybe 325. Just so that the bananas get high, because you want the color of the disc to be golden brown. You don't want the outside of the empanadas to be black or discolored. So now after we let the meat simmer for a little bit, you want to mix it up. It's already looking good. The meat's getting a little bit more darker. Now we can let that simmer for at least another minute. Like I said, we can put the rest of the stuff underneath here. Give it another turn here. Okay, there we go. Lower it down a little bit. It's already almost done. Now, while the meat is finishing, you can make your own dough for this. But what I usually do is I use the discs. So these are Goya, and these are the discs that I use for the empanadas. I feel like it saves more time when you do this. It takes more time when you have to prepare. So what I do is before you get started here, You want to cut it open, or cut it open, or you can peel it, but you want to cut it open. Now, before we put these down, you gotta have to make sure that the board is coated with flour, because these tend to stick. So now that the meat is dark, you don't want to get it too dark, just dark enough where like the meat is that color, so just brownish. And then what we can do is turn the meat off. And to keep it warm, just put the lid on there. Now, for the discs, like I said, we have to put flour on the disc just to make sure that the discs don't stick. So we get flour. Now it doesn't have to be a specific bag of flour, but I intend to use all-purpose flour. So what you want to do is just, you don't want to fill the board with flour, just enough where you take the disc. So it's got these little leverages here, so you can peel it off instantly. And then what you do is lay one disc at a time. So be careful, don't rip the disc, because if you rip the disc, that when you are tightening them together and you're closing them, if you're frying them or you're baking them, they can easily break apart and all the meat would just come out and it'll be a disaster. So you do 2 at a time, but before you make sure you don't pile them up on the board. So then once we get them out, you want to take the meat. You don't want to overfill the empanadas because they'll break, because what they do is that they tend to air up and puff up. So what you want to do is make sure that there's a generous amount of meat. So just like that. And what you want to do is you want to fold it, and you want to close these 2 sides here. So the step that I learned that I do, you can pinch it with a fork, and it you can pinch it with a fork and go outwards, or you can take your thumb and your finger and pinch, 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 pinch. Like I said, you can use it with a fork. First, I'll show you how to pinch it here. Pinch, pinch, and then just make sure that there's no open holes, because again the meat would fall out, and you don't want to do that because the meat will still cook. So you can see how closed it is. There's not too much meat, so you can keep it that way, or you could do it with a fork. So you do that, and then let's see, it's coming out a little there. Again, there's a little too much meat in here, so you don't want to do that. Just, you can take it like that. Now you can add. I decided to put a little bit of vegetables in it, but you don't have to if you don't want. And then what you do is you turn it. And if you're gonna do it with a fork, what you want to do is take the back of the fork and press. But you want to do that. Slide. Push and slide. Push and slide. Push and slide. And you want to be careful. I do it with my fingers because you want to be careful if you do it with a fork, because a fork, because you have to press down, and pressing down you could easily break the disc. So you want to make sure that when you're doing it you don't puncture holes. So what you do is you press and you slide, press, and you push backwards towards you. So you push again, in, backwards, push in, and you do backwards, and then push in, and then backwards. And then that's how it should look. Again, make sure that, be careful how you're doing it, because you don't want to puncture holes inside the disc. Or if you're doing it with your fingers, that's how it should look now. Now the oven is ready to go. So now once they're all either done with a fork, or if you're pressing with your fingers, you put them in the oven at 325 degrees and ready to bake. Okay, so as you can see now, I put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I put 6 on a pan. Now, mine is non-stick, so actually, or you could either way still put it on paper. Depending on how big you have your sheet pan or your sheet tray, then you can layer as much as you want. That way you don't have to put it in as you can put it in as a bigger batch. See, mine, I have kind of a small one, so I can only put up to 6. Depending on the sheet tray as well, that you oil it, you butter it, just so that these don't stick. And now, before we put them on, put them into the oven, we have a little bit of egg wash. So I'm gonna brush them. They have it's an egg and a very little portion of honey. So you just want to brush them. You want to make sure you get the entire empanada, because this helps the empanada. So you want to just make sure that you get the entire empanada. You just want to brush. You want to make sure we don't put too much on here. It's just a coat for color, and the honey is just for taste. So we want to make sure we do a coat. Maybe like a little dab, a little touch more. Okay. Now we put them in the oven. You don't leave these in the oven too long, so maybe about 5 to 6 minutes, just to the point where you want to get them to the point where they're golden brown, not to the point where they're over that color, because then the entire outside of the dish will just burn. So once they're golden brown, they're ready to, you can take them out and they're ready to eat.